Hey Book Dragons! I'm going to chat about the 10 books that surprised me in 2022. I went into these books with sort of no expectations, but they did wind up surprising me, and that is why I want to chat about them. And maybe if they have been on your TBR, maybe you will pick them up. So the first book we're going to chat about is Jade City. I did talk about this in my top reads of the year list, but I did want to mention why it surprised me so much. So let's admire that photo again. In 2021, I struggled to read a lot of adult fantasy. I just did. This book really worked for me, and I think the reason it worked for me is because it read to me sort of like an action movie, and it read to me sort of like the way that a YA book is structured, and I just liked it. It also gave me like Mortal Instruments vibes. I liked the characters. I liked that we had a bunch of different point of views. It wasn't as fighting heavy yet. I know that will come probably in Jade War and Jade Legacy, but I just like this and I want to go back to the series in 2023, but it was definitely one that stood out to me, and that is why it's on this list. Another book is wasn't really a surprise because I had a feeling I would like it more when I actually physically read it rather than listen to the audio, but I'm going to put Six of Crows on this list. So let's take a look at that pretty photo. I would show you my book, but it's ripped, so that is why it's not here. But yeah, let's take a look at Six of Crows. This is a book that I did not like when I read the audio for it, and I felt like it didn't work for me. However, when I reread it, I really loved it. I felt like the characters like really were special, and I liked the heist a lot more. I don't know why, but it just worked better for me as a physical read rather than an audio read, and I think I'm going to do that in the future. I'm just going to read all of Leigh Bardugo's books because I think her worlds are so rich, and I think you miss something in it. And also I think that like reading a heist book, I think I should have just read it physically, but I really enjoyed it, and that is why it's on this list. And I definitely want to go back and read Crooked Kingdom. I have to. It's on my wrap-up read. It's on my 5-star read predictions because I really did like Six of Crows. And now we're going to get into another read. This is thanks to the Avengers Reading Challenge. Thor Wants Another Letter recommended this. So I read The Healer and the Water Monster, and I'm going to give you the photo here. To do with Indian and Navajo mythology, and it basically followed this main character as he kind of lives with his grandmother for the summer, and he winds up having to save a water monster. It was very mythology heavy, so it reminded me almost like I was reading a Percy Jackson book, but it also had a lot of like conversations and a lot of dynamics. It was a really, really fun read. Very, very quick, very, very emotional, very, very heartfelt. I think I also gave it 5 stars. I just didn't really go in expecting much, but it packed a punch, and that's always what I say when I read the Rick Riordan Present books. They pack a punch. They do a lot of mythology stuff, but it also was very, very strong characters, and that is why I like this one. And then the next book we're going to chat about is Pretty Dead Queens by Alexa Dawn. I will attach the photo here. This is a cozy murder mystery set for the YA set, and you basically follow this girl whose mom died from cancer, and she winds up having to go back to live with her grandma, who's basically like the Jessica Fletcher of her time period. She writes murder mysteries, and when a murder in the present is eerily similar to a book that her grandma wrote about, she has to kind of become a sleuth to sort of uncover what is happening. And I like this book so much. Definitely a new favorite. I really hope we get more books in this series. I have quite a few Alexa Dawn books from like previous types of genres, like a lot of sci-fi that I do want to go back to read, and I do want to read the Ivies. I'm just hesitant to read the Ivies because I know that probably the characters are really unlikable, and I struggle with unlikable characters. But I love this. It read to me like a cozy murder mystery. It read to me like I was watching Murder, She Wrote, and this is just a murder mystery happening in there. I love the main character. She was not unlikable. It was great, and it was just a fun cast of characters. And then the next book that I wound up reading was a fantasy romance, which I don't read a ton of, but I wound up picking up The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle L. Jensen, and here's a photo of that one. This is a fantasy romance that I loved. Like, you basically have these two characters and they're sort of forced to marry, and things go from there. I really need to read The Traitor's Queen And I just like this. I struggle a little bit with fantasy romance. Like, I wasn't a big Court of Thorn and Roses fan, and that kind of put me off of it, but I love this book. I think I loved it because the relationship between the male lead and the female lead was really unique, and I also just love the various point of views that we got. I like the complexity of the world. It read like a very, very fast-paced story, and I was really invested in the romance. I sometimes find fantasy romance have lead males that I don't like, but I was game for this one, and I want to go read the sequel. I might do like a reading vlog, like catching up on these surprising reads and see how I feel about them. Let me know in the comments if you would be interested in that. It would probably be a reading vlog. But yeah, I just really enjoyed this and want to read more fantasy romance in 2023 for sure. And then the next book we're going to chat about is another new to me author, and that's Catherine Cowles, and we're going to talk about Wrecked Palace. Here is a pretty photo. This is the third book in the Wreck series by Catherine Cowles, and this one follows Kaylin, and it's like, you know, a small town story with a little bit of mystery and suspense at the end, but basically Kaylin is forced to look after her brother and her sister after her parents are sent to jail, and she winds up, you know, bonding with this young man as they try to solve a mystery that she's becoming prevalent in. And it was a good time. Definitely my favorite in this series. I think I like this book so much because Kaylin had been seen in the other two, and because the brothers and sisters were present and accounted for, and I liked how they sort of added to the story. I love a good suspenseful story, so I love Catherine Cowles for that. I know some of the people I watch like aren't the biggest fan of the suspense, but I like it because, as I said, my romance needs to have something else. So if my romance has like a self-discovery plot, I'll be here for it. If my romance is set in a small town and has that dynamic, I'll love it. If my romance has a mystery or like a suspenseful plot, I will like it, but it needs something more, and I think Catherine does that so well. So yeah, that is why this book is on the list. The next book I'm going to chat about is How to Survive Your Own Murder by Danielle Valente, and here's a photo, and then we'll chat about it. I will say, I'm not always the biggest fan of slasher and horror books because I don't feel like we have a real big connection to the characters. And this book was different. Like, I felt like it wasn't my favorite to start off. It probably would have been like a 3-star read. But the twist at the end of this book blew my mind so much that I want to know if we're getting more books in this series. But you basically follow this main character, and then you see her for the first year. It's set around Halloween. She's going into a corn maze with her sister, and then her sister is murdered, and she's like the only survivor, and she's the only witness. And then you follow the trial, and in the trial she sort of gets knocked on the head and is sent back in time to sort of stop her sister from being murdered. And things go from there. The first third of the book was okay. I got to the last like 20 pages and it blew my mind. So the end twist really was worth it, and I'm curious to see if book 2 is going to get better, or if we're going to get a book 2, because I felt like the ending ended on such like a unique place that I want to know what happens next. But it was a really compelling read, and that's why I bumped it up to 4 stars. And it wasn't just a 3-star read. The next book I'm going to chat about is They Will Never Catch Us by Jessica Goodman. This is her second YA thriller, and I really like this one, which is in contrast to her first book, which is why it's on this list. First book had a lot of unlikable characters in it, and this book sort of kind of towed the line. It does deal with much harder topics, I will say that, but you basically follow these two sisters. They're on the track team together, and their teammate goes missing, and they're like the prime suspects in this murder, and it was very compelling. I really enjoyed it. It was a quick story, dealt with a lot harder topics like abortion and sexual assault and stuff like that. Also the complexities of teacher coach student dynamics, which I thought was interesting, but it was a fast-paced read, and I just was really captivated. So that is why it's on this list, especially because I wasn't the biggest fan of Jessica Goodman's first book, but this book worked for me, and that's why I chatted about it. Yeah, my dad was talking to the puppy, and I thought you guys could hear it. But the next book we're going to chat about is also one that made my top reads of the year list, and that was The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead. Let's take a look at the photo. I went in this book with super low expectations because I didn't love In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. Everyone loved that, and I just assumed if I didn't love In the Dreams I Hold a Knife, I wouldn't love anything by this author. But I was intrigued by the sex cult avenue, and I just picked it up, and I devoured it. I read it in like 2 days. I read it over the summer when I was walking a lot with Cassie, with my puppy, and it was a great read. I mean, again, it does deal with harder topics, sort of like They'll Never Catch Us, but it was a very, very captivating read, one that I flew through. And I think what I'm gonna do for early school year next year, I'm gonna save some thrillers and just read those, because I think that will help me not fall into a reading slump, because that's where I was. I was just dealing with a lot of slumpiness, and I think that book would have been a great one to propel me forward. But I did listen to the audiobook, and I really preferred that. And then the next book we are going to chat about is the last book on this list, actually. It's called Lashed But Not Leashed. And this is a cozy mystery that I just picked up, and it's set at a veterinary office. But here's a photo. I think I like this because it's been so long since I found a new cozy mystery series that I really loved, and it just had elements that I loved. It was set at a vet office. It's set around like New Year's Eve. It was great. I even picked up book 2, and I like didn't even notice that like I missed key information. I have book 1 on haul for my library. I actually have to go get it tomorrow. I have to actually go to the library and get that. But it was a quick read. I liked all the characters. It gave me what I always wanted the Hannah Swanson series to be, but like it had a good solid mystery. I was compelled. It had to do with animals. It had to do with a vet office, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, those are the 10 books that surprised me in 2022. Let me know in the comments if there are any books that surprised you. I would love to know, and I'll talk to you guys for my next video. Bye, Book Dragons!